The noughties, of course, was the rise of social, blogs, wikis and podcasts. I put Will's book title up there as the mention of it. And it was really connecting every classroom, and it was about containing the rage a bit. Everyone got a bit worried about social. Cool, how are we going to filter it? I'm worried about who they're going to connect to. They're going to start to talk to strangers. And the internet, which we got to in the late 90s, started to really creep across the very fabric of our schools, and an awful lot of time was spent telling people what they could and couldn't do, on filtering, on expected behaviours, and it started to reach across everybody within the school. Again, I'll say, even in the noughties, I think the impact in many schools was limited. By the way, this is a broad brush. Many of you in this room were ahead of this mark. I'm not trying to 1 second suggesting that everybody in the room is at this point. Quite a number of you, for instance, involved in one-to-one programs that I was working with in the 90s. But this is a reasonably good snapshot of how it's gone. And now we're in the 20-teens, and the decade of disruption. Now, I'm not espousing to Clayton Christensen's disruptive theories. I like the general theory. I don't particularly go to his co-author Michael Horn's ideas about where all that's going. But it brought about ubiquity. In Australia particularly, it was the DER obviously. So over that span of 4 decades, we sort of went from this tiny little specialty to all of a sudden now every child, well pretty much every child, having access to their own personal portable computer, at least in our secondary schools. The vast majority of students have that. The vast majority are now connected by high-speed broadband through some form of NBN, eventually it's going to be. And we were starting to think of things that were invading in the operation of our schools, things like flipping the classroom, or MOOCs, massive open courses online. And we started to think, hello, is this going to see a shift in the way school operates? I'm not sure that's what I'd call disruptive. And I actually happen to know indirectly through Christensen's thinking, is despite what his book said, where a lot of the speaking around the world has been that this notion of disrupting class from people like Christensen and others and Horn was going to say that we were going to see a move to online learning, I think that's a wrong term. I think that's one option. I think we're going to do some work there. But that's an incremental shift. That's not disruptive, really. That's an incremental shift around our existing model. It still largely is existing pedagogy. There's not a lot of shift in understanding the nature of science and learning and teaching and learning through the use of technology. It's essentially the same way. But the 20 teens are a very different context for our schools to be functioning in. The places outside our school is very dramatically different to what it was 10, 20 or 30 years before. And that context, I think, is cause for us to ask the question, which is the title of this session. Because I would suggest that the pervasiveness and ubiquity of technology in our lives has pushed the value, as I've said here, and the relevance of our traditional model of schools to within an inch of its life. And I just think simple facts are we have to do better. Because it's an opportunity, it's not a threat. It shouldn't intimidate us, it shouldn't overwhelm us. We should be excited now by what we can do as a result of so much ubiquity, so much access, technology richness across our society and across our schools. And as I said, I know the sort of flagships at the moment are these MOOCs and Coursera and edX and whatever else. But I don't think that's the big steps that possibly we could be seeing. So to sort of summarise and bring it together, this is a sort of way I like to see it. This is a unique time. This is very different to what we saw even 10 years ago. Because now all of a sudden our students have access to whatever applications they want. Forget about whether they're apps or whether it's software, pretty much when they want to do something, they can get the software to do it. It probably doesn't cost them anything. If it's a freemium piece of the software, they'll get use of the software for a period of time. Some of this highly priced commercial software, they'll be able to install it almost instantly and run with it. So there's no limitation on the software that they have access to. Let's assume we've got universal access. At another time, and I'm sure this conference will spend a lot of time talking about the issues around DER and universal access and BYOD, and I'm not going to go down those paths at the moment. There's a lot to be dealt with. I'm not trying to trivialise that either. But we're a long way down the track from where we were even 5 years ago. And now that we see we're well in excess of 20 million students worldwide in a one-to-one environment, this is no longer a question of will it happen, but rather when will it happen. And within the next 2 to 3 years, we expect to see something in the order of 40 to 50 million students, and it'll be just a given that every student has this access. But just giving students access isn't the answer. You all know the story. You know, and if we assume that just about all of them have it, has anything really changed? And I know that many of you will have concerns in your schools that the common story we hear is that yes, I've got 2 or 3 teachers who are really engaged and doing great work. Is it a culture across the whole school? Not too sure about that. So the missing piece is the third piece of the little Venn, which is this notion of what we're calling contemporary pedagogical insight. And that was largely most of the work that we did out at Ideas Lab with Richard and Sophia and others and many people across the schools. We were interested in exploring what the impact was on pedagogy if we had these 3 pieces in place. And I think we're at the edge of seeing the answers to that. But again, I think what's important is for us to understand now the context in which we're operating. Because contemporary pedagogical insight doesn't come from us sitting inside a classroom. It comes from better understanding the modern learner's world, the young people who are with us today and how they learn. And I'm not sure that we really yet fully understand that. And I'm very pleased that Richard Olsen's doing 2 sessions. I think he's doing one this afternoon and one tomorrow. And he'll go into a lot of the detail. He's got some really inspiring work, which previews the book that he's going to be publishing later on, that really gives some tangible examples of what this looks like at the classroom level, at the lesson level. But the trouble is we've sort of always up until now been looking back. We've often looked at our existing practice in classrooms and we've said, how can we layer technology over the top of it? What can technology now allow us to do? And if we're lucky, we've used that I word, integration. And really, there's so much more we should be doing. We've got to look forward. It's important that we do understand the way our young people are living and the modern world, how they learn, and therefore what's the relevance of what we're doing in our school. Because relevance is so important to us.